Hello everyone and welcome to yet another episode of the Loan Management SaaS. So in this series, I'll be walking you through a step-by-step process on how to build and launch your very first SaaS using Django Tenants and React. So if you're looking forward to build your very first SaaS using Django Tenants and React, then this video is right for you. So let's get straight into it. So when it comes to authentication in Django Tenants, there are different strategies that you can use, but the approach or the strategy that I'm going to be using for this project is that you're going to be having one central account app that is going to be the user model for the application inside our accounts application in the public schema. So the accounts app is what is going to be used for authentication and identity. That's going to reside inside our public schema. Then we're going to have another app inside our tenant schema that is going to be called the tenant account. And the tenant account, the primary usage is going to be used for all business logic, authorization, as well as just adding some policies for our application. So everything authentication is going to live inside the accounts app, and then you're going to have a one-to-one relationship with the tenant accounts. So this is the visual representation of how the authentication is going to work. So in Django Tenants, once again, we have different schemas. We have the public schema. This is like the main possible schema, and then we also have the next one that is going to be the tenant schema. That is now going to be the schema for that specific tenant. So right now we do have two different apps here. Just like I told you, we have the accounts application that is going to be residing in the accounts app, and then the account application is where the user model is going to reside. Because remember, Django only supports one user model. You cannot have like multiple user models for your application. You can only have it in one model. So in this case, it's going to reside inside our accounts app in public, inside a model that is called GlobalUser. So the GlobalUser is what is going to be used for identity. This way we're going to keep fields such as phone, user ID, as well as a role field that is going to map the different types of user that we have using the user manager. So email, phone, user ID, and also a role field. That's really important for just knowing which type of user is going to be, because we have different types of users. We have the platform staff. We also have other types of users such as the super admin, and we also have the tenant staff. Right, so you need to have a category of users, and that is where the role comes in. So the public schema with a one-to-one relationship with the tenant account app inside the tenant schema. The allowed apps, that is if you want more granular control of the types of app where this user is going to be able to access, then you can have allowed apps over here. For example, for the auditor, you can only give him the allowed apps of, let's say, the finance and the report applications. For the member, you want to give the member only access to the member app. So that is if you want fine-grained control for the types of resources and actions that this user can be able to perform. And that is why we are going to have this array field for the allowed apps and also the allowed actions. Allowed actions can be the default actions such as create, update, delete, right? We can also have other custom actions such as approve loans, disperse loans. That is what we're going to look at in our upcoming series. So that is the architecture of the authentication part of it. Now, just to have a clear picture of how the authentication works, here in this slide, I do have that's a visual representation of the relationships of how the models are going to work together. So we talked about the global user. So think of this one here as the global user model, where we have all the identity fields. You can think of the one such as the ID, because that comes by default. We have the email, phone, the user category, because we're going to have different categories of users, and just other Boolean fields such as is staff, is super user, is the phone verified. Those are going to be used for identity. And then now this is where the tenant schema starts from this section over here. This is where we're going to have our tenant schema. So the tenant schema is going to store all these details such as the user ID that is going to be mapped to a one-to-one relationship with the global accounts, and then we can have role, first name, last name, phone, email, as well as more granular control is to have like an allowed apps and allowed actions section. pin hash and pin items that is going to be used for our USSD, because remember this is a multi-channel app. We are going to have a mobile app and as well as a USSD application. So pin hash and pin items is just going to control if somebody enters the wrong pin, let's say for 4 times consecutively in a specific time frame, then we're just going to flag it as somebody who's trying to hack the user's account. So we're going to lock that. That is why we have the pin attempts and also the pin locked until. So this is the tenant accounts where we're going to have 3 different types of models. As you can see, we have members, we have staff, and we can also create others, let's say for investor and auditor. So here we can just plug in different types of models. We can add staff, like we already have that, but we can also add other types of users such as auditor and investor. And that is one of the beauty of Django, which means you can just extend and grow your app without even touching your existing tenant accounts models. Just have one model, and then whenever you want to create a new user category, you can just extend it using that one-to-one relationship. So that is it for our database design of the authentication. Now let's go ahead and see the user model itself and also the different types of managers that we have. So right over here we do have a global user model. As you can see, we have a different type of users. The categories that we got the super admin, the platform staff. These are now the staff who are going to maintain the platform. And also for the tenant accounts, we are going to have this one that is going to be used for the tenants. That is the business admin, the owner of that business, the business staff. The business staff can be like a loan officer, like a branch manager. We also have the business member as well as business investor. So those are the categories that we're going to have for our application. And then now this is now the fields, the email, the phone, the first name and the last name. You really don't have to have them. They're optional. They're just good for sending some welcoming emails for the users. And also the user category, that is just going to be a choice field for our user category that we just defined, with the default being the business staff. Then we just have some boolean fields here for is active and also one for is super user. And then lastly here we just have some properties here for our application, just to check if the user is a global, if the user is a tenant user, as well as the type of authentication that this user is going to be using. So that is it for our global user, and that global user lives inside the public schema. Now let's head over to the next type of user or the next application, that is going to be the tenant accounts. So inside our backend directory, tenant accounts, and then inside models, we have this model here now which lives inside the tenant schema. So here you can see that we do have the name, it's called the tenant user, and then the important file or the important code in this entire model is this one over here. This is what links our user with the global user. That is what you're going to use to identify this specific user here, and it's really important. As you can see, we've defined it inside our tenant schema. So we have the one-to-one field here that is going to be on delete. We just want to cascade. Then the related name is going to be the tenant profile. So that is going to be used for querying to avoid that end-to-one problem that you normally have in Django. So other types of choices here, the role choices, we do have the business admin. So these are the types of policies that we're going to have. So for example, there can be a user that's a business admin, a branch manager, loan officer, auditor, investor, and member. So these are all business logic, and that's why we've defined them inside our tenant schema instead of just placing all of them inside our global user model in the public schema. So business admin, branch manager, loan officer, those are just for business. And now to actually map the user to the global user model that we do have a role to global category. For example, business admin here, branch manager, that's a business staff, loan officer, that's a business staff, auditor, business staff, and then we have these ones over here, member and investor, that is now a business member, and then business investor, just like you saw in our account tab, if I can take you back to the models.py, you can see that we do have these types of users. So we need to map these roles to the tenant account over here. That is why we have this roles to global category. We need to map each role to the global category. So business admin, that is the owner of that business, is going to be the business admin. The member is just going to map to the business member. And then this one is what is used for linking the user to the global public schema. So that is it for the linking. We can also have others such as the permissions up here. Like I told you, if you want more control, you can have allowed apps and also the allowed actions. Then of course we have these boolean fields, the pin, some metadata for timestamps, as well as some properties here at the bottom. And then we have the save method that is just going to be used to automatically generate a staff ID whenever a member has been saved. So we also have this other properties here such as has pin, that is just going to be used for pin authentication. There's also one for checking pin. So those are just methods for the USSD logic that we have, as well as the properties for the full name. Okay, these are just checking the different types of users that we have. The user is a staff, the user is an admin, if the user is an investor. So you can have those properties here inside your tenant user model. So that is it for the authentication of our application. We have those two models that are going to be linked together. So in the next one, we're going to build the client's application over here. This is what is going to be for the tenant model, where we're going to see how you can register your first tenant, as well as create admins, because we talked about two multiple admins that we're going to have. One is going to be the tenant user admin, and the next one is going to be the global user admin. So that is what we're going to be covering in our episode. So that is it for today. If you found some value in this video, please consider to give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and also share it with other like-minded individuals. So that's it, and see you in the next episode.